The Death Guard trudge inexorably into battle amidst the drone of endless swarms of flies. Bloated, rotten, and riddled with disease, these revolting traitors are virtually immune to pain. Each heretic Astartes is utterly dedicated to spreading the feculent blessings of the plague god Nurgle and working the will of their cadaverous demon primarch Mortarion. Hi there, I'm Guy, you're watching Midwinter Minis, and in this video I'm going to show you how to quickly and easily paint up your Death Guard models for Warhammer 40,000 with tutorials for both Plague Marines and Poxwalkers in a single video. Although Death Guard are one of the main forces in 40k and you can find similar models in lots of kits, these particular models can be found in quite a few box sets. The easy to build Plague Marines and Poxwalker boxes, the old 40k starter set First Strike, and of course the No Respite expansion for Blackstone Fortress. Death Guard models are really great for beginners and help hone your skills with forgiving shapes and loads of texture, perfect for adding easy detail with washes and dry brushing. The traditional Death Guard colour scheme is also really simple and will be nice and easy to recreate using my recommended paint selection. If you want to follow along, you'll find the list in the description, but I'll quickly run through them now. You're going to need a black, a white, gunmetal silver, a deep gold, neutral green, a rich yellow, a fiery red, a nice solid blue, a deep purple, a leathery brown, a tan or khaki colour, neutral grey, a black wash, a brown wash, and to make some bits look a little bit more slimy and gross, some gloss medium or varnish. I usually share a few assembly tips in my speed painting videos as well, but these are just so easy to make there's really no point. I do love how they thought this needed instructions though. However, there are a few dangly bits on the models that you should just be aware of though. These little pieces can break easily if you push against them while trying to assemble the models, and will need a little bit more care when you're dry brushing them. I always like to add basing elements before I prime, so to make them match with the rest of my Blackstone Fortress set, I'm adding random spots of aquarium gravel and fine sand, and leaving the rest smooth. To give your paint something to stick to, and to make everything a bit more robust, I primed all of the models in grey. I also like to give the models a quick blast of white directly from above too. This helps the paint we apply on the top facing parts look a little bit more vibrant and bright. It's always very subtle, but for the extra 2 seconds of effort, I think it's worth it. Okay, let's start off with the Plague Marines. The first thing we're going to want to paint is the power armor. You could use Death Guard green if you have it, but by mixing our neutral green and leathery brown, we can make a colour that's pretty much the same. And we save a bit of cash not buying yet another specialist paint. Thin it with water, or water mixed with a bit of matte medium like I'm using, and with a nice big brush, paint the entire body of all of the Plague Marines. To see how quickly we can get a decent Death Guard paint job, I'll be using this little timer for one of the models. Now to get a bit of interest in that armour, let's do some messy dry brushing with a mix of green and tan. Get a bit on a big old brush, work it into some paper so there's not a lot of paint left on the brush, and swoosh it all over the armour back and forth. This lighter tone gets deposited on the sticky out bits, adding some quick, easy highlighting and texture. Once you're happy with that, let's start picking out some areas of skin, bone, and those weird tree-like growths. Mixing tan and white together gives us a nice pale, deathly bone colour. I gave all of those areas I just mentioned 2 thin coats, so as not to obscure too much detail with paint that was too thick. Now do not worry about being too neat here, we can always fix any mistakes on the armour later. While that bone mix is still wet on your palette, squidge a drop or two of purple paint into it and mix it in. Use this lighter purple paint to paint all of the squiddy bits, the gross tubes and the tentacles poking out of the tattered armour. Oh, also don't forget to drill your barrels, it's never too late. To create a dark colour for the weapons that's a bit more interesting than just black, mix black and leathery brown together. I also use this colour to paint the tubes that look a little bit more mechanical than biological. A couple of the models have little fabric bits, so I added a squidge of red into that dark brown that I just used and gave the drapey fabric a quick coat. Now that most of the non-metallic parts are taken care of, let's add a quick dry brush to all of the Plague Marines to add some super fast texture and catch some highlights. Adding a tiny bit of tan into white paint to create a warm off-white, mix it up thoroughly, and very lightly dry brush all over the models. This neutral tone does a pretty decent job of accentuating all the colours that we've used so far. And once that's done, it's time for the metallics. Mixing gunmetal and deep gold together in equal parts creates a really interesting antique metal look. I use this to paint the gun barrels, the magazines, the trim around the shoulder pads, and any parts that look particularly metallic, like the Orbi vents on the power packs and the chainmail. I'm still going pretty fast here, and still using that big fat size 7 brush, but any mistakes I make on the armour along the way will be touched up with a quick brown-green mix again before we move on to the next stage. And that will be the wash stage. And this will help smooth out that dusty look from all the dry brushing we've just done, and add a bit of dingy darkness to the models, very appropriate for the Heralds of Nurgle. To do this, we're going to mix brown wash, black wash, and water in equal parts. Again, instead of water, you could use a bit of water matte medium mix, or something like Citadel's Larmium medium, just to make the shade a little bit more subtle. Slop this on all over the models. I usually say try to wick away the excess if it's pooling in recesses, but to be honest, tide marks and uneven patches will sort of add to the gross effect we're going for here, so just get it done and don't worry too much about being neat and tidy. Boom! 25 minutes of hands-on painting per model, an hour or so to dry, and these guys are ready for the tabletop. I quickly painted the debris on the base with grey and dry brushed it white to match my Blackstone Fortress theme, and painted the rest black. As you can see, this is a really fast, really effective way of getting the more traditional Death Guard colour scheme in a matter of minutes. You can easily paint up a whole squad in an evening and have them ready to game the next day once the wash is dried. These are obviously different colours, but similar techniques I used to get my full 2000 point Chaos Space Marine army painted up in a non-stop 25-hour painting challenge earlier this year. I'll link to that video at the end of this one, but we're not quite finished here. If you want to spend a little more time on each model, we can add some cool details that will make them even more eye-catching during your games. For most of these steps, I'll be swapping out that size 7 synthetic brush for a small size 2 detail brush. Let's start the clock again, and first up we'll give quick highlights to all of the raised areas of bones and horns using our white tan mix again. It's nice and thin, but always looks quite stark when you put it on. Once it dries, it'll be much more subtle and transparent. Avoid all the recesses, and just try to catch the really obviously top-facing sticky out bits. Next, I'm going to create an armor highlight color by mixing in a tiny bit of green into that horny bone color we just used, and I'm mostly using this color to catch the underside of all the pock marks and bullet holes on the armor, being careful just to catch the outside rim, not to actually go into the holes. You can also use this color to lightly catch the edges of the armor panels that stick out. Small sketchy touches will add to that rough, mottled armor effect, rather than wasting time trying to do smooth, clean edge highlights. We can also add some subtle rust effects by adding a tiny bit of red into our yellow paint to make a hot orange, watering it down loads so it starts to break up, and then dabbing it onto areas of the chainmail and armor. It's so bright you'll think you've ruined the model forever, but by watering it down so heavily, you'll see that when it dries, it's way more subtle. One of these Plague Marines has nice eye lenses, so we'll do our usual coloured glass trick of painting a base coat of red, adding a touch of yellow to make an orange and painting more towards one side, bottom left in this case. Then add a little bit more yellow and paint an even smaller portion of the lens on the bottom left. And then finally we'll add a tiny dot of white on the top right. This contrast of colour and the tiny highlight makes for a pretty convincing lens look on small models like this. Now let's bring back a bit more shine to the metallic parts, the weapons and the chainmail, stuff like that. Using just gunmetal paint this time, remove most of the paint from your brush on some paper and then gently stroke it against the edges of the metallic parts, being careful to aim your brush so that you don't accidentally catch it on the armor or any squiddy bits. Once you're done with that stage, you might want to bump up the contrast on the models a bit. An easy way to do this is to use your black wash and your detail brush to panel line sections of the armor, just trying to run the wash in a slightly more guided way into the recesses of the armor and in between sections of different colors, just to give everything a little bit more definition. Finally, to add some gross monster effects, I'm mixing gloss medium, Citadel's Ard Coat in this case, with red paint and a tiny bit of water to thin it down, and then painting this all over the squiddy parts and tentacle bits. This will pool a little bit in some places, making some areas appear more red, and will also dry shiny, giving those parts a permanent wet look to really sell that gross Nurgle effect. You can also streak this downwards on random parts of the body to make it look like their flesh is leaking out of their power armor. Okay, so that's just over 40 minutes per model, and I'm pretty happy with the result. As I said right at the start, these Plague Marine sculpts are very forgiving for novice painters, and even using basic techniques and rushing through it, you can still get a pretty decent paint job that looks great on the tabletop, and you don't have to slave away for hours and hours on every single model. Remember, mistakes are going to happen when you're trying to paint this fast, and that's okay. We can always go back to colours and tidy them up. If you're a more experienced painter, you might be thinking, that's a good start, but I can see lots of ways to improve it. And you're totally right. This guide is just designed to get you most of the way there. Good enough for a game of 40k, Kill Team or Blackstone Fortress, but ready for your own personal touch too. So that's the Plague Marines taken care of. Now let's look at the Poxwalkers. In 40k, these guys get buffs for being in big squads, so chances are if you're fielding these models, you're going to want to paint a lot of them. That's why I want to show you how to get them tabletop ready as fast as possible. Even if you're painting a squad of 20 models, you can finish the job in one painting session. Starting off with the grey prime all over and a white spray from above, the first paint we're going to apply is a white tan mix to create a deathly flesh tone. Use a big brush, slap this on all over, making sure to hit all of the skin and bone parts. It doesn't really matter if you hit other parts too. As we're batch painting here, by the time you finish the last one, the first one you painted will probably be dry and ready for the next colour. Also, I've got the timer running for all 6 at once here. Next up, we're going to paint the tattered clothes. Have a drop of green, red and blue ready on your palette, and just paint their clothes one by one, alternating between the colours. I didn't even bother cleaning my brush between the colours here. If they mix, who cares? They're supposed to be Walking Dead shambolic monsters. Once their clothes are coloured, mix your green, blue and red paint together to create a rich grey and paint the boots, weapons, chains and armour on the models. Once all those areas have been covered, crack out your brown paint and using a slightly smaller brush this time, paint the straps that a few of the models have. Some of the weapons also have wooden handles, so paint those brown too. Next up, we're going to really heavily dilute our purple paint with water to create a purple tint, and dab this all over any of the tentacle bits, around open wounds, and into the recesses, cracks and crevices on random parts of the skin so it looks like bruised, battered flesh. Okay, 26 minutes gone for all of these models combined so far, and lots of mistakes have been made. But in the places where one colour should be another, or where you've gone over the border between areas, don't worry about it. Instead of fixing it with the right colour, we're just going to cover it with dried blood. Easy. Dull your red paint down by adding a touch of black paint, and use this deep, desaturated red to dab little splotches here and there on the skin, clothes and weapons. You can also dilute this down like we did with our purple to add a more subtle red tint too. At this point you might want to go and make yourself a coffee or something and have a little break. The last few steps were particularly wet, and when you come back, the models will be ready for a quick dry brush highlight. Mix a tiny bit of tan into white paint to make a warm off-white again, and give the models an all-over dry brush, focusing on the sharp pointy bits. That step will dry pretty much straight away, so quickly switch out to your silver paint and your detail brush to catch all of the little rivets, nails, metal clasps and rings, and when there's not much paint left on the brush, gently sweep it across any metallic weapons and chainmail to add some shiny highlights. And once that's done, it's time for the wash stage. Mix up the same shade we used for the Plague Marines, so equal parts black wash, brown wash and water, and slather this all over the models. Once that's dry, paint your bases however you like, and believe it or not, after just 45 minutes painting 6 models, that is all you need to get tabletop ready Poxwalkers. This ultra speedy painting technique also works pretty well for any zombie miniature, so if you were looking for a quick, easy way to paint up your zombicide models, don't be afraid to give this a go. With these 9 models now done and dusted, that also means I've finished the No Respite expansion for Blackstone Fortress, meaning I've just got 1 episode left on the list to complete. Ascension, here we come. Now, as some of you may know, in the last couple of episodes we mentioned that we were almost at 1,000 Patreon supporters, and that when we hit that landmark we were going to order the Mars Pattern Warlord Titan, the biggest, most expensive model Games Workshop make to build and paint for the channel. Well, we smashed that target, and the biggest boy is on its way to us right now. Every episode, I like to thank the newest supporters on Patreon with a quick shout out. And this week, there's quite a few. So please enjoy these cinematic shots of the Death Guard models I painted up in this episode, while I say thanks to all these awesome new Midwinter Mini supporters. Here we go. Verithy, Alec Campbell, Louise Soper, Aidan Lonergan, Warlord Titan Wen, Julian Kasten, Nagri, Christoph Kampworth, Scop the Fig Boy, Franz J. Lazendorfer, Aidan Morris, Max Childers, Jad Boyden, OLC Wargaming, Sergeant Excelsior, Jason Dasley, Merry Jelly, Super Dave 629, Catherine Brown, Candy Nuke, Funky Bristles, Ur North, Red Monkey, Stephen Ings, Alan Hogarth, Ian S. Murray, Lane, Big H1243, Devil Machine, Josh Helkar, John Hansen, Alfarius Omegon, Chris Watson, Cooper Delay, Philip, Ginger Paintbrush, Calvin Skinner, Colin Mitchell, Hampus Rinderborn, Killian Firekill, Mace Yvonne, Trash Boy, Larry Gale, Jack Chetwood, Jeff Danielson, Dave W, Liz Harkinson, Summon the Titan, Michelle Richardson, Callum Mayer, Jonathan Mead, Dane Law Jig, Baden Volker, David Blackburn, Jack Harding, Replingham 153, Gavin Marquis, John Ha, Paul Elwood, Kanai Tiger, Calvin Blittman, Terry, LP Wilson, Rebel Pandas, Siposit, Simon Klinkskill, Russell Maxwell, Jared Fox, Padge Nolan, Luke Kramers, Jesse Polo, Ethan Higgins, JM, Cameron May, KG Mitch 96, Nils Backstrom, 40 Emperor, Kyle Planktonic, Alkanda, Daniel Vech, Isaac Miller, Oswald Bastable, Aaron, Helgi, Travis Gentz, Micah Reed, Lawrence, Joseph Oliver, Noxic Pa, John Chesham, Biobasher, Pneumono Ultramicroscopic Silico Volcano Coniosis. Thought you had me there. Toonsy, Caleb Rodder, Demon Cookie, Yasha, Matthew Montero, Jackson B, Simon Bang, Bryn Goldsmith, Alex, Daniel Conway, Griffin Pafford, Iolus, Snorri, Brandon Gateskill, Yori Boone, Christoph Drenek, Drew Swain, Slanahesh, Bone Skull, Bo Nielsen, Ravenwolf Retrotech, Bob McBob, Azku, Jack Fletcher, Sean Lane, Chefter, Jordan Evans, Dan, Knickerbocker, The Noctur, Alex Kelly, Ziggy, Michael Nunez, Jeb Seacom, John Titor, Three Little Squigs, Black Olive Games, NDS711D, The Blithering Oath Hunter, Zach Goldberg, Rungi, Riley Needham, Benedict Habermeyer, Henry Nielsen, Wes Bodie, Anthony Sanders, Joshua Zimmerman, Charles Shepard, Thomas Falcorn, Darren Wenzel, Luke Nichols, Badger and Ollie Boo, Stephen Rogers, PFC Sock, Garen Osborne, Brett Hartle, Nick Martin, ZK, Plucky, Joe Kinney, Kevin Murray, Connor Madison, Tater Beta, Johnny Parker, Dan Willman, Rienzi Gokia, and Pacifist Warlord. Seriously, I'm blown away, and I can't wait to start working on this Titan. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now!